On a cool September evening in 1931, the crystal chandeliers of Oheka Castle blazed with 10,000 lights. 500 guests in silk and diamonds filled the grand ballroom, their laughter echoing across 443 acres of manicured estate. The orchestra played Gershwin. Champagne flowed from golden fountains, and beneath it all, watching from the marble staircase, stood the man who was secretly losing everything. His name was Otto Kahn. Heir to nothing, he had built himself into one of America's wealthiest men. The banker who financed railroads, the patron who saved the Metropolitan Opera, the immigrant from Germany who conquered Wall Street and constructed this mansion as proof. At 64, with silver hair and a perfectly tailored tuxedo, he looked every inch the king of New York society. But Otto Kahn knew a dark truth his guest did not. He was going broke. As the party swirled around him, Otto descended the staircase into the ballroom. The room stretched 120 feet from end to end, with ceilings 30 feet overhead. Silk panels covered the walls. Italian marble formed intricate patterns on the floor. Above it all hung the largest chandelier in any private home in America, 3 tons of crystal that had cost more than most families would earn in a lifetime. When Otto had designed this room 13 years earlier, working with architects Delano and Aldrich, he had imagined it as the heart of his mansion. Not just entertainment, but a statement, a declaration that an immigrant could build something magnificent, something eternal. But as he moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and handshakes, Otto knew the truth. Nothing was eternal. The fortune that had built this castle was evaporating. The stock market crash of 1929 had begun the tragedy. What followed was worse. Banks failing, industries collapsing, investments turning to ash. The seemingly endless wealth from Kuhn, Loeb and Company, accumulated over 4 decades, was disappearing like smoke. As the guests danced, Otto thought about what they didn't know. He had dismissed half the staff last month. The greenhouses that once produced exotic fruits year-round now stood dark and empty. The garage designed for 126 automobiles now housed a dozen, the rest sold quietly. Maintaining this castle cost $500,000 annually, and he no longer had $500,000 to spare. The mansion's 127 rooms echoed with a different kind of emptiness now. Once, every bedroom hosted weekend guests. Once, the libraries overflowed with first editions and rare manuscripts. Once, the art galleries displayed masterpieces from Europe. But as the bills mounted and the fortune dwindled, Otto had begun selling pieces of his dream. A Rembrandt here, a medieval tapestry there, small losses that nobody noticed. Yet. As a woman in emerald silk approached, laughing about something trivial, Otto smiled and nodded. He had spent his life wearing masks, the German immigrant who spoke perfect English, the Jewish banker moving in Christian society, the man of culture working in Wall Street's ruthless world, the heir to nothing who had built an empire. Tonight, the mask felt heavier than ever, but he kept it on. As the waiters in white gloves circulated with the silver trays of caviar and oysters imported from France, as the champagne fountains sprayed gold-tinged arcs into the air, each drop catching the chandelier's light. As the ice sculptures of swans and dolphins slowly melted into golden trays, water pooling like tears, it was all so beautiful, so perfectly orchestrated to demonstrate wealth and taste and power and permanence. And it was all a lie. As Otto stood in the centre of his ballroom surrounded by America's elite, he thought about the bills piling up in his study, the letters from creditors, the desperate calculations he made late at night, trying to keep the mansion running for one more year. One more season, one more party. The chandelier above sparkled like a constellation. He remembered the day it was installed, how workers needed special equipment to lift it, how he stood in this spot thinking he had created something permanent. 3 tons of crystal, each piece imported from Czechoslovakia, each one catching and refracting light into 1,000 rainbows. It had taken 6 months just to assemble. Another fortune spent on beauty. But nothing lasted. Not fortunes, not keels, not the American dream that brought him from Mannheim to this Long Island estate. The dream promised that hard work and ambition could build empires, that an immigrant with nothing could become everything, that success once achieved was permanent. All lies. All beautiful, glittering lies as fragile as crystal. As the music swelled and couples twirled, Otto realized something dark. He was watching not a celebration but a funeral, his own. The tragedy was unfolding in his own ballroom, in his own mansion, and nobody else could see it. They saw champagne and chandeliers. He saw the beginning of the end. Vanderbilts mingled with Astors. Oil barons traded jokes with railroad magnates. Hollywood stars posed for photographers, but they didn't notice the cracks forming. They didn't see the darkness gathering in the corners. They didn't understand that the fortune holding up this castle was crumbling beneath their dancing feet. A senator from Connecticut, his face flushed with champagne, clapped Otto on the shoulder and congratulated him on the mansion's magnificence. A Broadway actress in diamonds asked about the spring garden party, already planning her attendance. A steel heir wanted advice on investments, assuming Otto still had the golden touch that had built this empire. Each conversation was a small tragedy, a reminder of everything he was losing. As midnight approached, Otto moved to a window overlooking the estate's grounds. 443 acres stretched into the darkness, shaped and sculpted at tremendous cost. The formal gardens, the golf course, the bridle paths winding through woods he had purchased tree by tree. All of it would soon belong to someone else. The heir to nothing would return to nothing, and this mansion would stand as his monument and his tomb. But Otto would remember something else, standing in the ballroom he designed, in the castle he built, in the dream he created from nothing, and knowing with absolute certainty that it was all slipping away. The dark truth was simple. As a young immigrant, he had arrived with nothing. He had climbed to unimaginable heights. He had built this mansion, this monument, this symbol of everything America promised. But the American dream was fragile. Fortunes could vanish. Castles could fall. And a man could lose everything while standing in his own ballroom surrounded by people who believed he still had it all. As the orchestra played another waltz, Otto kept his smile fixed. The guests kept dancing. The champagne kept flowing. The chandelier kept blazing overhead like a dying star. But beneath the surface, the tragedy was already complete. The heir to nothing was becoming nothing again. The fortune was gone. The mansion would follow. The party continued, as it always did, as it always would, until the music finally stopped. To understand how a man loses everything in his own ballroom, you must first understand how he built the ballroom. You must travel back 4 decades, to a different country and a different man. To a young immigrant stepping off a ship in New York Harbor, carrying nothing but ambition and a dream that would consume him. To the years of climbing Wall Street's ladder, rung by rung, to the moment he decided that wealth alone wasn't enough, that he needed something permanent, something beautiful, something that would outlast him. But even as the music played and the guests laughed and the champagne sparkled, the walls were closing in. The mansion that had taken 7 years to build would crumble in 5 more. The fortune accumulated over 40 years would disappear in 4, and the man who had everything would die with almost nothing, remembered not for what he built, but for what he lost. The dark story of Otto Kahn's ballroom was only beginning, but the ending was already written in the cracks nobody else could see, in the dark spaces between the laughter, in the tragedy hiding behind every smile, in the heir to nothing who had briefly become everything before becoming nothing again. As Otto Hermann Kahn stood in his ballroom that September night in 1931, watching his fortune crumble, he thought about another night 43 years earlier, a February evening in 1888, when he had stood on the deck of a steamship watching the lights of New York Harbor grow brighter through the darkness. He had been 21 years old, carrying 1 suitcase and speaking broken English, but he had carried something else too, something that couldn't fit in a suitcase. The belief that in America, an heir to nothing could become everything. His name was Otto Hermann Kahn, and he was born in Mannheim, Germany, on February 23rd, 1870. The timing mattered. Germany was changing, the old order was cracking, and for a Jewish family like the Kahns, change brought both opportunity and danger. Otto's father, Bernhard Kahn, worked as a banker in Mannheim's financial district. Not one of the great bankers, but a competent man who understood numbers and risk. He taught his son young. By 12, Otto knew that money was simply a tool, and the greatest fortune came not from inheriting wealth, but from understanding how wealth moved through the world. But Bernhard taught Otto something darker. Being Jewish in Germany meant always standing outside, always proving yourself twice as hard, always knowing that the mansion German aristocrats inherited would never be yours. The grand estates, the old wealth, you could be wealthy, you could be respected, but you could never truly belong. Otto learned that lesson well. Watching his father work 12-hour days for clients who barely acknowledged him, Otto understood something dark. Money could buy almost anything, but it couldn't buy belonging. Not in Germany, not for Jews. So when Otto turned 18, he made a decision that would change everything. He would leave, not running from tragedy, but sailing toward opportunity, toward a place where being Jewish didn't matter as much, where an immigrant could rise on merit, where new fortunes were being made by men who had started with nothing. America. Otto spent 3 years preparing. He worked in his father's bank, learning everything he could about international finance. He studied English until he could read the Times of London without a dictionary. He saved money from his small salary, counting every pfennig. And he read everything he could find about American banking, about Wall Street, about the men who were building railroads and steel mills and oil refineries across a continent that seemed to have no limits. By 1888, he was ready. His father gave him 200 marks and a letter of introduction to a small German bank in New York. His mother cried. His younger siblings looked at him like he was sailing off the edge of the world. But Otto felt something different as the steamship pulled away from Hamburg's docks. Not fear, not sadness, excitement, because he was sailing toward something, toward the greatest opportunity the world had ever offered, toward America. The crossing took 2 weeks. As the ship entered New York Harbor on February 14, 1888, passing the Statue of Liberty that had been dedicated just a year earlier, Otto felt like he was shedding his old skin. In Germany, who your grandfather was mattered more than who you were. In America, nobody cared about your grandfather. They cared about what you could do tomorrow. The heir to nothing was about to become something. The reality of new. York hit him immediately. Germans and Irish and Italians and Jews all jumbled together, in a city rebuilding itself every day. Buildings going up, streets being paved, everything in motion. Everything possible. Otto reported to the Deutsche Bank branch the next morning. The manager assigned him the most junior position. Clerk, recording transactions, filing papers. Otto didn't complain. He worked 12 hours a day learning American banking practices, faster than German ones, more aggressive, more willing to take risks. He studied English at night until his accent faded. He learned about the railroads pushing west, the steel mills in Pittsburgh, the oil fields in Petalbud in Pennsylvania, and he learned the greatest truth about America. Nobody asked about your grandfather. They asked what you could do. Within 6 months, Otto had caught the attention of Abraham Wolf, a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company, one of Wall Street's premier investment banks. Wolf was German-Jewish too, and he recognized something in Otto, not just intelligence. Though Otto was brilliant with numbers, not just ambition, though Otto clearly wanted more than a clerk's salary, but timing, the ability to see where the market was going before it got there. In 1891, Kuhn, Loeb and Company hired Otto as a junior associate. He was 24 years old, he had been in America for 3 years, and he was about to enter the greatest fortune-building machine the world had ever created. Wall Street in the 1890s was like nothing Germany had ever seen. Fortunes were made in months, lost in days, rebuilt in weeks. The country was expanding at a pace that seemed almost magical. Every railroad needed financing, every factory needed capital, every new venture needed banking expertise, and Kuhn, Loeb and Company was at the center of it all. Otto thrived. He understood something that many American bankers didn't. European investors wanted access to American growth, but they were terrified of American chaos. They needed someone who understood both worlds, someone who could speak German and English, someone who could explain American railroad bonds to Frankfurt investors and American business practices to Berlin bankers. Otto became that bridge. He traveled between New York and Europe, raising capital for American railroads and industrial companies. He earned commissions. He invested his commissions wisely. His wealth grew, but Otto wanted something more than just wealth. He had seen what happened to men who only chased money. They became rich and empty. Their mansions were filled with things but empty of meaning. He wanted to build something that would last, Something beautiful, something that would prove an immigrant could create culture, not just capital. In 1893, at age 26, Otto was made a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company. He was the youngest partner in the firm's history, the first German Jewish immigrant to reach that level. His salary jumped to $50,000 a year, more money than his father had made in a lifetime. That same year, Otto married Adelaide Wolff, daughter of his mentor Abraham Wolff. It was a good match. Addie came from wealth and understood the world Otto was entering. She shared his love of culture, of music, of art. She shared his vision of what their life could become. As Otto and Addie stood together after their wedding in their new brownstone overlooking New York Harbor, Otto thought about that February night 5 years earlier, when he had arrived with one suitcase. Now he had everything. A partnership, a fortune growing by the year, a wife from one of New York's finest families. But it wasn't enough. Money was just the beginning. The heir to nothing who had become someone now wanted to become something more, something permanent. He wanted a legacy, a mansion that would rival anything in Europe, cultural contribution that would outlast his fortune. He wanted to prove that an immigrant could create beauty, not just capital, that the American dream meant more than money, but first he needed more wealth, much more. Building a legacy required the greatest fortune of the age. By 1914, he had the money. Now he needed the monument. By 1914, Otto Hermann Kahn had everything a man could want. At 47, he was one of Wall Street's most powerful bankers, with a fortune exceeding $20 million. He had a wife who shared his passion for culture. He had 4 children. He had respect, influence, and access to every mansion in New York society. But Otto wanted something more, something permanent. He wanted to create beauty in a country obsessed with money, and he knew exactly what form that beauty should take. A castle, not a house, not a mansion. A castle, the kind of estate European nobility had built for centuries. The kind of place that would make the Vanderbilts look modest. The kind of monument that would prove an immigrant who started with nothing could create something magnificent. Otto began his search in 1914. He knew what he wanted: elevation for views, acreage for grandeur, proximity to New York, but far enough to feel like another world. He found it on the highest point of Long Island near Cold Spring Harbor, 443 acres of rolling hills and forests. The elevation meant views for miles. The acreage meant gardens, golf courses, bridle paths without limits. And the location, just an hour from Manhattan, meant accessibility without sacrifice. Otto paid $1.2 million for the land, equivalent to $18 million today, just for the dirt. But Otto wasn't building a house. He was building a legacy. As soon as the purchase was complete, Otto assembled his team. He hired Delano and Aldrich, one of America's most prestigious architectural firms. They had designed estates for the wealthiest families in America, but Otto's vision challenged even their experience. He wanted a French chateau in the style of Versailles, but larger. 127 rooms, gardens rivaling Europe, perfection. Delano understood. This wasn't just another mansion, this was permanence in a temporary world. The architect proposed French classical architecture, with limestone facades, steep mansard roofs, and perfect symmetry. Otto added his own touch. The name, not Cold Spring Harbor Estate or Kahn Manor. He named it Oheka, an acronym from his own name, Otto Hermann Kahn, both modest and egotistical. He wasn't naming it after himself exactly, but he was embedding his identity into every letter. Construction began in spring 1914, just as Europe slid toward war. While German and French armies prepared to destroy cities, Otto Kahn was building his French chateau on American soil. The irony wasn't lost on him. As a German-born Jew who had become more American than most natives, Otto existed between worlds. Building a French castle was perhaps his way of declaring independence from all of them. The construction was massive. 600 workers reported daily, stonemasons from Italy, carpenters from Germany, landscapers from France, each bringing expertise to create something unprecedented in America. Not just the size, but the attention to detail, the quality of materials, the sheer ambition of recreating European grandeur in the New World. The main house stretched over 109,000 square feet, 127 rooms across 3 floors, 39 fireplaces with hand-carved mantels imported from European estates, a ballroom holding 500 guests, with silk-covered walls and ceilings painted by French artists, a library for 20,000 books, a formal dining room seating 40, guest suites that most families would consider mansions themselves. But Otto's vision extended beyond the house. Formal gardens modelled after Versailles, with geometric patterns appreciable only from upper floors, an 18-hole golf course, bridle paths winding through preserved woods, greenhouses producing rare orchids year-round, a garage for 126 automobiles, because Otto understood the future belonged to automobiles, and any estate worth having needed space for every guest's vehicle. The ballroom, though. That was Otto's masterpiece. He watched Addie spend hours planning it with architects, choosing every detail. The room would stretch 120 feet end to end, with ceilings 30 feet high. The walls would be hand-painted silk panels depicting classical mythology, each taking weeks to complete. The floor would be Italian marble in patterns so intricate guests would stop to admire them. And suspended from the painted ceiling would hang the largest chandelier ever installed in a private American home. 3 tons of Czechoslovakian crystal, each piece hand-cut and positioned to refract light in specific ways. As Otto stood in the unfinished ballroom in 1917, 3 years into construction, watching workers install the silk panels, he imagined the parties to come, 500 guests dancing beneath that chandelier, musicians playing in the gallery above, the most powerful and cultured people in America gathering in this room to celebrate beauty and art and the permanence of great architecture. He imagined his grandchildren's grandchildren dancing here a century from now, the fortune that built it long forgotten, but the beauty remaining. The costs mounted steadily. By 1918, Otto had spent nearly $9 million. By the time construction finished in 19, the total exceeded $11 million, equivalent to $165 million in modern currency. More than most companies were worth, more than entire towns' budgets. But Otto didn't hesitate. This was what he had built his fortune for, not to accumulate money, but to create something that transcended money. Finally, in the summer of 1919, 5 years after construction began, Oheka Castle was complete. Otto and Addie moved in with their 4 children, bringing with them an art collection, worth millions, furniture imported from European estates, and enough staff to run a small hotel. The castle required 126 full-time employees just for daily operations, cooks, maids, gardeners, chauffeurs, maintenance workers, and a small army of specialists maintaining the grounds and collections. The opening party in September 1919 announced Otto's arrival as one of America's great cultural figures. 500 guests attended, including names that defined American wealth and power. Vanderbilts and Astors walked through rooms that made their own estates seem modest. Senators and governors toured gardens that rivaled anything they'd seen in Europe. Artists and musicians performed in a ballroom that represented the greatest private achievement in American architecture. As Otto stood in his completed ballroom that September night, watching 500 guests dance beneath his 3-ton chandelier, watching light refract through Czechoslovakian crystal onto silk-covered walls, watching the American dream made manifest in Italian marble and French limestone, he felt something rare. Satisfaction. He had done it. The heir to nothing had built something that would last forever. The newspapers called it the finest private estate in America. Architects came from Europe to study its design. Society columnists declared it second only to Biltmore in size, but superior in taste and elegance. Otto had achieved what he set out to do. He had proved that an immigrant could create culture, not just accumulate capital. He had built a legacy. But even as the music played and guests celebrated and the chandelier sparkled overhead, even as Otto smiled and accepted congratulations and watched his dream made real, something dark was stirring. The castle built for eternity would barely last a generation. The fortune that seemed endless would evaporate in a decade. And the man who thought he had created permanence was about to learn that nothing in America was permanent, but the castle built for eternity would barely last a generation. Chapter 4. The Golden Age, the decade that followed Oheka Castle's completion in 1919, became the stuff of legend, not just in Otto Kahn's life, but in the history of American excess itself. The Roaring Twenties, they would call it later. The Jazz Age, the era when fortune seemed endless, when champagne flowed like water, when the American dream meant not just success, but spectacular, glittering, impossible success. And at the centre of it all, on the highest point of Long Island, stood Otto Kahn's castle, his monument, his masterpiece, the ballroom where everything he had dreamed of came true. The parties began almost immediately. Otto and Addie hosted their first weekend gathering in October 1919, just weeks after the grand opening. 50 guests, carefully selected from New York's wealthiest families. Vanderbilts arrived in their custom automobiles. Astors brought their latest European acquisitions to display. Rockefellers discussed oil and philanthropy over imported champagne. The ballroom, with its 3-ton chandelier and silk-covered walls, became the stage for America's greatest fortunes to celebrate themselves. But 50 guests was just the beginning. As word spread about Oheka Castle's magnificence, the parties grew. 100 guests, 200. By 1921, Otto was regularly hosting weekend gatherings with over 300 people. The ballroom could hold 500, and Otto was determined to fill it. The weekend parties became legendary. Guests would arrive Friday evening, their automobiles filling the elegant garage designed for 126 vehicles. They would be shown to their suites, each one larger than most people's entire homes. Dinner on Friday night seated 40 in the formal dining room with crystal from Bohemia and silver from London. After dinner, everyone moved to the ballroom. The ballroom, always the ballroom. That was where Otto's vision truly came alive. As guests entered through the grand doors, they would pause. Even those who had seen it before, even the Vanderbilts and Astors who lived in mansions themselves. The room was simply overwhelming. 120 feet of polished marble floor. Walls covered in hand-painted silk depicting gods and heroes. Ceilings painted to resemble the sky at Versailles. And hanging above it all, catching and refracting every light in the room, the chandelier. 3 tons of crystal that sparkled like captured stars. An orchestra played from the gallery above. Not just any orchestra, but musicians Otto imported from Europe specifically for these parties. They played Gershwin and Cole Porter, the new American jazz that was scandalizing traditionalists and thrilling everyone else. Couples danced across the marble floor while waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and caviar. In the corners, deals were made. Fortunes changed hands. Marriages were arranged. This was where power lived in America, in Otto Kahn's ballroom. But Otto wanted more than just parties. He wanted culture. He wanted to prove that wealth could create beauty, not just consume it. So he became one of America's greatest patrons of the arts. He poured millions into the Metropolitan Opera, literally saving it from bankruptcy in 1923. He funded young artists and musicians, helping launch careers that would define American culture for decades. He brought European theatre and dance companies to New York, exposing American audiences to works they had never seen. The mansion itself became a cultural centre. Otto hosted concerts in the Grand Ballroom, with world-famous performers playing for intimate audiences of 200 guests. He displayed his art collection throughout the house, including works by Rembrandt and Vermeer. He opened his library to scholars, letting them study his collection of rare manuscripts and first editions. F. Scott Fitzgerald visited in 1922, shortly after publishing his second novel. He stood in the ballroom, watching a party swirl around him, watching the wealth and beauty and excess, and later he would write about a mansion on Long Island, a green light across the water, a man who had built a palace to win back the past. Some said Oheka Castle inspired The Great Gatsby. Otto never confirmed it, but he never denied it either. The guest list read like a directory of American power. John D. Rockefeller discussed philanthropy with Otto in the library. Charlie Chaplin performed impromptu sketches for delighted guests. Enrico Caruso sang arias in the ballroom, his voice filling the space as it had once filled La Scala. Politicians came to seek Otto's support and advice. Businessmen came to propose ventures and partnerships. Artists came to request patronage. And everyone, absolutely everyone, wanted an invitation to one of Otto Kahn's legendary weekend parties. By 25, Otto had achieved something rare. He had become not just wealthy but influential, not just powerful but respected. He sat on boards of the greatest corporations. He advised presidents. The New York Times called him the most cultured man in American finance. He had transcended being merely rich. He had become an institution displaying wealth as culture. The ballroom saw it all, engagements announced over champagne, business empires forged over cigars in the corner, artists discovering their patrons, politicians making alliances. Every weekend brought 500 of the most powerful, most beautiful, most ambitious people in America to dance beneath that 3-ton chandelier. As Otto stood in his ballroom on a Saturday night in the summer of 1928, watching yet another magnificent party unfold around him, he felt something approaching contentment. He was 61 years old. His fortune was estimated at over $40 million, making him one of the wealthiest men in America. His 4 children were thriving. His marriage to Addie, while not passionate, was respectful and functional. His cultural contributions were recognized worldwide. His castle stood as proof that an immigrant who had started with nothing could create something permanent and beautiful. The Great Gatsby had been published 3 years earlier, cementing in American mythology this idea of the self-made man building his palace on Long Island. Otto wondered sometimes if Fitzgerald had captured something true, that all of this, the castle, the parties, the wealth, the culture, was built on the same fragile foundation as Gatsby's dream, built on desire and ambition and the American belief that anything was possible if you worked hard enough, dreamed big enough, reached far enough. But surely Otto's foundation was stronger, Gatsby was fiction. Otto's fortune was real, built over 40 years of careful banking and smart investments. His castle wasn't a stage set. It was limestone and marble and crystal, permanent, eternal. The music swelled, couples twirled, champagne flowed. The chandelier sparkled overhead, 3 tons of crystal catching every light, refracting it into 1,000 rainbows across the silk-covered walls. 500 guests laughed and danced and made their deals and lived their magnificent lives in Otto's magnificent ballroom. This was the peak. This was everything Otto had imagined when he stood in that unfinished room back in 1917, watching workers install the silk panels. This was the American dream made real, the immigrant who conquered Wall Street, the banker who saved the opera, the patron who brought culture to a country obsessed with money, the man who built a castle that would last forever. Standing there in his ballroom, surrounded by the most powerful people in America, watching his dream unfold in silk and crystal and champagne, Otto Kahn felt like the luckiest man alive. He had everything: wealth beyond measure, respect beyond price, a legacy that would outlast him, a monument that would stand for centuries. But the music was about to stop forever. Chapter 5. The Fall. The music stopped on October 24, 1929, Black Thursday. Otto Kahn was in his office at Kuhn, Loeb & Company when the stock market collapsed. Not declined. Collapsed, like a building with its foundation removed. He stood at his window overlooking Wall Street and watched men running, brokers sprinting between buildings, messengers shouting, ticker tape machines chattering out losses so fast the paper piled on the floor like snow. Otto was 62 years old. He had survived panics before. This felt different. This felt like the ground opening up. The losses mounted with terrifying speed. Millions on Monday, tens of millions by Friday. By November, Otto had lost half his fortune. $20 million evaporated, gone. But Otto told himself he would survive. He still had 20 million, still had the castle. The market always recovered. This was temporary. He was wrong. The crash was just the beginning. The Great Depression settled over America like darkness that wouldn't lift. Banks failed. Factories closed. Unemployment soared. The Jazz Age ended with soup lines and men selling apples for nickels. Kuhn, Loeb & Company hemorrhaged money. Railroad bonds defaulted. Industrial companies went bankrupt. International loans collapsed. Every investment Otto had made over 40 years was crumbling. By 1931, Otto was no longer wealthy. He was struggling. The castle cost $500,000 annually to maintain, bleeding him dry. The 126 staff members required paychecks he increasingly couldn't meet. The greenhouses needed coal he couldn't afford. The automobiles needed maintenance he couldn't justify. The art collection, once priceless, became inventory to be sold piece by piece. Every morning brought new bills. Every afternoon brought new creditors. Every evening brought calculations that never added up. The mansion that was supposed to symbolize permanence had become an anchor dragging him under. Each room, each chandelier, each marble floor represented wealth he no longer had. The parties stopped. Not dramatically, they just stopped. The ballroom stood empty. The chandelier's 3 tons of crystal hung dark and silent. The silk-covered walls looked down on nothing. Otto began dismissing staff, 5 employees in January 1931, 10 more in March. By summer, half were gone. The formal gardens reverted to wilderness, the greenhouses stood empty, the golf course grew over with weeds. The art went next. A Rembrandt sold quietly, a Vermeer auctioned in London. Medieval tapestries, first editions, gold candelabras, silver service. Anything that could slow the bleeding went to auction, but it wasn't enough. The depression deepened. Otto's salary was cut, then cut again. His investments yielded nothing. The fortune built over 40 years vanished in 4. By 1933, Otto faced the unthinkable. He would have to sell Oheka. The monument built to prove a nay. Immigrant could create permanence, the palace supposed to last forever. One night in December 1933, Otto stood alone in his ballroom. The staff had gone home. Addie was upstairs. The castle was silent, dark, cold. They couldn't afford coal for the furnaces. Otto walked across the marble floor, his footsteps echoing. The ballroom that had held 500 guests, where Vanderbilts danced, where Rockefellers made deals, where Chaplin performed, where Crusoe sang, where the most powerful people in America had celebrated wealth and culture. Empty now, silent, dark. He looked up at the chandelier. 3 tons of Czechoslovakian crystal, each piece hand-cut and positioned. The largest chandelier ever installed in a private American home. It hung there, dark like a dead star. No light reflected off the silk walls, no music filled the space, no laughter echoed off the painted ceiling. This was where he had lost everything. Not on Wall Street, not in his office downtown, here, in this ballroom. In this room he had designed to celebrate permanence. He had learned that nothing was permanent. The fortune was gone. The dream was dead. The castle would be sold to strangers who wouldn't understand what it meant, what it represented, what it had cost in more than money. The silk walls seemed to mock him, the painted gods and heroes looking down at a man who had fallen from heights they could never reach. The marble floor, imported from Italy at tremendous expense, was now just stone beneath his feet. The ballroom that had been the theatre for his greatest triumph had become the stage for his greatest tragedy. Otto sat down on the marble floor, his back against the cold wall. 66 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than most men earned in a year, sitting alone in a ballroom that had once hosted America's grandest parties. He thought about February 1888, arriving in New York with 1 suitcase, the heir to nothing, dreaming of everything. He had achieved it for 20 years, fortune, family, culture, castle, legend. He had proved that an immigrant could succeed, that hard work and intelligence and vision could create something beautiful, that the American dream was real. And now, sitting in the dark ballroom, he had nothing. Debts, a castle he couldn't afford, reputation crumbling, health declining, wealth gone, legacy dying, everything dissolving like smoke. The ballroom seemed to mock him with its emptiness, where 500 guests had danced, where deals had been made, where culture had flourished. There was now only song, only darkness, only the echo of footsteps and the memory of music that had stopped forever. The ballroom seemed to mock him. The silk walls with their painted gods and heroes, the marble floor that had cost a fortune, the chandelier hanging dark overhead, all of it built to last forever, all of it bankrupting him. The monument to his success had become the monument to his failure. He thought about Fitzgerald's book, The Great Gatsby, published 8 years ago. Everyone whispered it was inspired by Oheka. Otto had never confirmed or denied, but sitting here in the dark, he understood. Gatsby's tragedy was building everything on a lie. The green light was impossible. The past couldn't be recreated. Otto's dream hadn't been a lie. The castle was real. The fortune had been real. But both were gone. And what did that prove? That even real things could disappear? That permanence was an illusion? He stood slowly, joints aching, heart heavy. He looked around the ballroom one last time. He would have to list it for sale. Watch strangers walk through, appraising, calculating. They would never understand what it had cost. Not just $11 million, but the dreams. Otto walked out of the ballroom. He didn't look back. 3 months later, in March 1934, Otto Kahn died. Heart failure, the doctors said. But everyone who knew him understood. He had died of a broken heart, died watching his dream crumble. Died knowing the castle built for eternity would barely outlive him. He was 67 years old, the heir to nothing who became everything, who was nothing again at the end, the immigrant who conquered Wall Street, who saved the opera, who built a castle. All of it ended in a dark ballroom. The castle was sold immediately. The family couldn't afford it. The estate liquidated what remained to pay the debts. Art dispersed. Furniture auctioned. Crystal, silver, gold sold. The mansion that cost $11 million sold for $100,000. The new owners didn't understand Oheka. They didn't appreciate the ballroom. They saw rooms, acreage, assets, staff dismissed entirely, greenhouses torn down, gardens died, golf course abandoned. The grand ballroom where Otto lost everything stood empty, silent, waiting. And the castle he built to last forever. Its nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 6. The Abandoned Castle. The nightmare began quietly. After Otto's death in 1934, the castle stood empty. The family, drowning in debt, couldn't maintain it. The 127 rooms echoed with silence. The ballroom where Otto had lost everything stood dark. The 3-ton chandelier hanging motionless above floors no one walked. In 1935, a developer stripped it of anything valuable. The silk panels in the ballroom, painted by French artists, were removed and sold. The marble mantels from 39 fireplaces went to auction. The crystal chandelier, piece by piece, was dismantled. What Otto spent 5 years and $11 million to create, strangers destroyed in months for pennies. The formal gardens became wilderness. The golf course disappeared under brush. The greenhouses, windows shattered, became skeletal frames. In 1940, the federal government seized the estate for World War II. Soldiers trained on grounds where senators had strolled. The ballroom became a mess hall. Combat boots marched across marble that had felt only dancing, shoes. After the war, the castle became Eastern Military Academy in SEAL 48. For 36 years, teenage cadets lived in suites designed for Vanderbilts. The monument to culture became a boarding school. By the early 80s, the academy was struggling. In 1984, it closed, and Oheka Castle stood empty again, empty and dying. 50 years of use had taken a brutal toll. The roof leaked, water destroyed ceilings, windows were broken or missing, vandals stripped whatever remained, graffiti covered walls that once displayed Rembrandts. The ballroom suffered worst. The marble floor was cracked and stained. Walls showed water damage and mould. The painted ceiling was fading, peeling, the chandelier was gone, leaving only the mounting bracket like a scar. The room that held 500 guests in silk now held only debris and darkness. Local officials discussed demolition. Too far gone, they said, too expensive to restore. Better to tear it down. But in 1984, developer Gary Melius saw something different. He bought Oheka Castle for $1.5 million, less than Otto had paid for the land alone. The restoration took decades and cost $30 million, more than twice what Otto spent to build it. Melius hired craftsmen to repair the roof, restore windows, rebuild walls. Artists repainted the ballroom ceiling. A new chandelier was installed, capturing the original's magnificence. Marble floors were refinished, gardens replanted. Slowly the castle came back to life, not as a private mansion. That dream died with Otto, but as a luxury hotel and event venue. In May 87, Oheka Castle reopened. The ballroom began hosting events again. Not weekend parties for the Vanderbilts, corporate events, weddings, fundraisers. 500 guests could still fill the room, but now those guests paid thousands of dollars to rent the space. The ballroom where Otto celebrated culture had become a business. The irony would have devastated him. His castle, which bankrupted him as a private home, was thriving as a commercial venture. The mansion that cost him everything was profitable when beauty generated revenue. Today, Oheka Castle stands restored and magnificent on the highest point of Long Island. Tourists drive past it taking photographs. Wedding parties arrive in limousines. Couples pose for photos on the grand staircase. The formal gardens, replanted and maintained by a full-time staff, bloom with the same geometric precision Otto had envisioned. The ballroom hosts events nearly every weekend, the chandelier sparkling, the marble floor polished, 500 guests dancing beneath painted ceilings. But something essential is missing. The soul, the purpose. Otto built this castle to prove that an immigrant could create culture, that wealth could serve beauty, that the American dream meant more than money. He built it for permanence, for legacy, for meaning. What remains is magnificent but hollow, a beautiful shell that survived while the dream inside it died. Visitors walk through rooms without knowing their history. Wedding guests dance in the ballroom without understanding what it cost, what it represented, what was lost there. The castle stands, but Otto's vision is gone. His legacy is complicated. The Metropolitan Opera still performs, funded partly by his millions. Young artists he supported went on to shape American culture. The castle itself, against all odds, survived. But at what price? Otto died broken and nearly bankrupt, watching his dream crumble. His family lost everything. The monument he built to last forever was abandoned, vandalized, nearly destroyed. Yet here it stands, restored, functioning, beautiful. Perhaps that's the truest legacy. Not the dream of what it was supposed to be, but the stubborn reality of what it became. Not a private palace frozen in time, but a living business adapting to survive. Not permanence, but resilience. The American dream Otto chased promised that hard work and vision could build something eternal. What he learned sitting alone in his dark ballroom in December 1933 was that nothing is eternal. Fortunes evaporate, mansions crumble, dreams die. But sometimes, if you're lucky, something survives. Not in the form you imagined, not serving the purpose you intended, but surviving nonetheless. On a Saturday evening in Thionville, the ballroom fills with guests again. A wedding, 500 people in formal wear laughing and dancing. The chandelier sparkles overhead, catching light and refracting it across the walls. An orchestra plays from the gallery. Champagne flows. The marble floor gleams. It looks almost exactly like one of Otto's parties from 1925. The same room, the same capacity, the same elegance. But everything is different. These guests paid to be here. The bride and groom will leave tomorrow. The castle is a business, not a home. The dream of permanence became the reality of commerce. And somewhere in the spaces between the music and laughter, you can almost hear the echo of footsteps. A 66-year-old man walking across marble floors, looking up at a chandelier gone dark, realizing that he lost everything in the room he designed to celebrate having it all. The ghost of Otto Kahn, still haunting the ballroom where his American dream became his American tragedy. The castle built to last forever did survive, but not the way Otto intended, not as a monument to culture and permanence, as a reminder that in America, nothing lasts forever except the relentless need to adapt, to change, to survive. The mansion lives, the dream died. And perhaps that's the most American ending of all.